Before passing judgment, read my entire story. I was married to Lena for a decade, and I wouldn't have believed you if you would have told me all those years ago that I would one day sleep with her older sister, Riley. That I would one day marry Riley. We'll get to that. The nightmare began with the death of Lena, who I will forever call my true wife, from pancreatic cancer. And the second chapter of grief began on an evening 2 weekends ago when I asked, "Was she telling the truth?"
About what?
Riley replied. From the front room of Macy Manor, I stood and watched the snowfall beyond the window, watched the white bury black. Meanwhile, Riley was sitting in her father's old armchair by the crackling fireplace and nursing a tumbler of brandy in loose fingers. Clearly, like me, reflecting on everything. When Mr. and Mrs. Macy died in 2005, Riley inherited that lavish Edwardian house and became Lena's guardian. It was shortly after this that Lena, my childhood friend, finally admitted the truth. Lena told me that the two of you could see the spirits of your parents, I finally answered. Riley stared vacantly at the opposite side of the room, and I followed her gaze. My eyes fell upon an empty armchair with a still shadow sitting upon it. Strangely, the fireplace's animated flames cast dancing patches of darkness across every other surface in the room. My late wife's sister finally whispered.
A century ago, Ernest Macy built this home upon a dark hole in the ground. In his diary, he forbade descendants from ever entering the hole, for it took a terrible toll on him. A toll that, nevertheless, gifted the Macy family with the ability to see the specters of their lost loved ones. Of course, let's be honest, that gift will die with me. I'm the last of the Macy lineage, and I won't be having any children.
Lena never mentioned a magical hole in the dirt, I said, trying to stifle a chuckle.
Because you always wear that shit-eating grin on your face, Artie,
Riley replied, smirking as she tapped the heel of her foot against a dusty leather-bound book on the coffee table.
This is Ernest's diary.
I think that book's been sitting there since I first visited your home. Anyway, I've always respected your family's beliefs, Riley, but I've never seen any evidence of ghosts in this house.
Well, you're not a Macy.
I nodded, pressing my palm against the outline of Lena's engagement band in my pocket. No, not quite. Riley continued looking at that unsettling armchair, empty save for the heavy shade upon it. Then, she coldly said,
Lena wants to show you, the best way she can show a non-Macy, that she's here.
Without even thinking, I immediately replied, I want to believe. Lena, if you hear... Ah! The empty armchair interrupted me. It was flung upwards and flipped upside down, hurled against the white ceiling to which its base clung tightly. And I yelled, of course, as any rational person would. Veins protruded beneath my skin as I tightly clenched every muscle in my body. Only a second later, the paranormal chair fell and landed, kicking up a mound of dust in its overturned state on the floor. After an unknown length of silence, I croaked. I've felt her in this house ever since she passed.
The dead never really leave this place, so grief is different for a Macy. Even for you, Artie. You're as good as family.
What if I actually had been a Macy? I asked, eyes welling. What if I'd married Lena and taken her name? She nodded.
My mother married into the family and she saw the faces of the dead.
Then, Without leaving an appropriate pause, I asked something horrific. "We should marry. You and me. That way, I'll be able to see her too." I expected ridicule or a scream of protest once Riley realized I was telling the truth. But she seemed to immediately detect the sincerity in my tone. Perhaps the thought had already crossed her mind.
Let's not go there, Auntie,
she warned. I turned to the overturned armchair, addressing the shadow I knew to be cast by my wife. "Lena, it would only be a marriage on paper."
I'm not refusing on her behalf. And you'd need to do more than legally change your surname. We would need to consummate the marriage, Artie.
Oh, came my meek voice, followed by the flipped armchair's disapproving creak.
Oh, as in, oh, if only you could see the face your wife is pulling.
I fell quiet after that, and my sister-in-law went up to bed a few minutes later. I, on the other hand, spent the rest of the night skim-reading Ernest's diary. Lena was reading alongside me, and I felt her excitement, which rivaled mine, as we read Ernest's section titled, "The Plea of Two." A gust of wind rucked a chunk of the old brown page, rucked the passage which read, "To return a loved one's physical form, the ritual must be performed by 2 living members of the Macy family." However, I felt it in the air. Felt that my wife wanted a second chance at life. And had she not, I wouldn't have pushed it. Wouldn't have woken Riley and explained the situation at 4 in the morning. She quarreled with Lena about the ethics of it all. Not so much marrying and sleeping with her late sister's husband, but resurrecting the dead. Lena and I should have listened. But we didn't. And Riley was, after only 10 minutes of arguing, corrupted by the desire to end our collective grief.
If we don't try, I'd always regret it.
My jaw hung. Does that mean?
Vegas is the quick option.
My sister-in-law interrupted.
And we'll consummate the marriage briefly. No lights, no talking.
I nodded, sobbing joyously as I eyeballed the shadowy corner of the bedroom in which I knew Lena lurked. A few days later, once Riley and I had successfully obtained ESTAs, we flew out to Vegas, signed the deed, did the deed. That greatest shame of our lives unfolded in an unlit hotel room for a little less than 10 seconds, and was followed by a long, silent flight back to England. A week after we'd hatched our plan, we returned to Macy Manor. Drove along the driveway on a night darker and snowier than the formidable one on which we'd made this unnatural decision. All that discomfort and regret washed away upon stepping across the threshold, however, because there she stood, blonde-haired in her unmistakable blue dungaree. She was a spectral light, burning blindingly into my retinas that watched me from the main staircase. We ran towards one another, sobbing and professing our love as we did. And those tears only flowed more heavily as our arms ran through one another, as we realized, of course, that we could not touch. Of course, I reminded myself of the only reason that Riley and I had done what we did. We were going to bring Lena back. The ghost of my wife stood in the front room's doorway as Riley and I, holding hands, followed the instructions detailed within Ernest's diary. 2 Macy members reciting the plea of 2, begging for a dark thing, which we did not understand, to return Lena to us in physical form. Begging that dark hole in the basement, which we were forbidden from even looking upon. I wondered whether every single Macy family member had, in fact, obeyed Ernest's strict rule. Surely, in the space of a century, somebody else had been down there. I was wrenched from my thoughts by the bulky diary slamming shut, a force which rattled the very house itself. In response, Riley and I gasped, turned to the doorway, then gasped again. Lena's phantom form wasn't there. Then, from the entryway, a creak. Without any sense of self-preservation, I tiptoed towards the lobby, peered around the doorframe, and whimpered soulfully as I saw the basement door standing ajar. A door I had never, in the 20 years of visiting Macy Manor, seen open. And through the slight gap in the darkness of the basement staircase, there glowed a rather timid set of blue eyes that I would have recognized anywhere. They weren't translucent this time. "Lena!" I wailed, feeling twice as euphoric as I had during our first reunion.
Auntie?
Riley began as I rushed forwards, hints of uncertainty and fear in her raspy voice. I barely noticed anything other than the eyes of the woman I loved. I reached for the door handle with eager blindness. I didn't even find it odd that Lena's blue eyes disappeared into the darkness as I threw the door open. I followed, bounced down the wooden steps in that black, forbidden part of the manor. Willfully ignored the stench of a smell that did not belong in the earthly realm. Riley was right. Grief is different for a Macy. Moonlight, invited inside by an empty slit of a window frame, revealed a black hole in the very floor of the basement. An ancient wooden door lay open, suggesting that Ernest had kept the supernatural opening under lock and key. But I cared for none of that. The moonlight, most importantly, revealed Lena. All in that place was a dream, from my unthinking head to my light toes. For I was floating, perhaps literally, towards the physical embodiment of my wife. It was only as our lips met that the vision began to sour. There came a feeling that had been trying to bubble to the surface from the moment that Riley and I had completed the plea of two. Terror. Warmth filled my mouth. A black warmth violating my senses, having circumvented my defenses. And when I opened my eyes, I screamed. A scream muffled by her mouth. I looked into eyes no longer blue, but black. A ravenous black that swallowed the irises, then the entirety of the eyes. Her muscular fingers dug deeply into my upper arms, preventing my escape. And then she began to step backwards, began to reverse into the hole, taking me with her. It had all been a lie. The plea of two was never going to bring anybody back. It brought something else out of the hole. And that made me fear what other lies the blackness had told Ernest Macy. What terrifying rituals he might have performed There came footsteps down the stairs, and I saw Riley in the glossy reflection of the demon's black eyes. Saw her come so close to reaching me before being tossed like a rag doll against the far wall of the basement. The toes of my trainers started to slip into the unholy darkness, and I felt a chill beyond coldness. Something that no human knows how to feel. I closed my eyes and prayed that I would meet an end. I had a feeling that surviving in that black place would be the worst nightmare imaginable. Whilst blind to the world, however, I was startled to feel that the creature's lips and nails released my frail body, letting me fall backwards onto the basement floor. And I opened my eyes to see something horridly beautiful. White hands, stemming from a form that brightly illuminated the dingy basement, were knotted within the false Lena's hair. And those hands began to push the deceitful creature's head downwards, casting the creature back into the black world. I sobbed as the ghost of the true Lena, steel shackles binding her wrists and neck to the black realm below, revealed her form behind the creature she was submerging into the darkness, into the nightmarish world, which was claiming Lena's bound, ghostly form too.
I love you,
she mouthed tearfully. I reached out helplessly as Lena's teary eyes slipped into the opening, following the thing she had vanquished. Then, the wooden trapdoor swung closed. For days, I have felt a deeper grief than before. A grief worsened by my inability to move forwards. Riley had been right all along. I don't eat. I don't sleep. I sit in front of her room, eyeing the many dead faces of the Macy family. But there's only one I hope to see, even if that hope rots my insides. If she doesn't walk through that door soon, I will find a way to bring her back.